I'm Alan Dodds-Frank, the president of the Silurians. I welcome you all. And this is our annual Lifetime Achievement Award dinner. And we are here gathered to celebrate our fellow Silurian, Sanford Sandy Socolow. And unfortunately, as many of you in the room have learned, I have to report that our intrepid honoree, after returning over the weekend from a short trip to Malaysia that I failed to discourage him to take, is currently camped out at Lenox Hill Hospital. Now, he has a good excuse. He went to see his daughter, who is a diplomat in the political section in Kuala Lumpur, and his two grandchildren. One of his sons, Jonathan Socolow, who is here now, who has crossed the line and is a lawyer, not an unemployed newsman, is going to represent his father, and I'm fairly confident he'll do a faithful and a funny job. Jonathan and I today visited Sandy at Lenox Hill. Raymond, if you could show everybody the picture. He looks worse than he is because he hasn't been shaved up there. I took this with my cell phone. Raymond, can you oh, Raymond's down here. Oh, there we go. It's a little dark because I should have used a flash, but it minimizes the stubble. Anyway, he's, as far as I can tell, completely lucid. And so any need to write his obituary to make sure it's on file is premature. Obviously, we wish him the best for a speedy recovery. His brother and sister-in-law are here, many of his great friends and colleagues from CBS News. A little later, I'm going to have a lot to say about Sandy, and I hope some of you are too. But first, I would like to thank everybody who has helped make this group run so smoothly, starting with our dinner chair, Wendy Schlick. Stand up, please, Wendy. She's done a superb job of organizing tonight, and I'd like to thank her predecessor, who is our membership chairman and former president, Mort Steinman, who helps us all with everything. I can't imagine he was a managing editor, and you know those managing editors who actually are the guys running the paper to make sure it gets out. Without Mort, the Silurians wouldn't get out. I also want to thank Treasurer Karen Bedrosian Richardson, who has brought more financial sophistication than we've ever had to running our business affairs, and First Vice President Betsy Ashton, who have done a great job in running our events, particularly the lunches. I mean, and thanks to Betsy, we have name tags we can all read. We actually entered the 21st century. You can use a credit card at a Silurian event. Swipe on an iPhone. Anyway, I would also like you all to please take home and cherish the Silurian News. And I want to thank editor Bernie Kirsch. Where are you, Bernie? For its excellence. And I also urge you to read the stories by other Silurians, including our jack of all trades, triple threat, 3 bylines, don't get tired counting them, former President Myron Kandel. But since we have a lot of old pros here, Myron's not even the only triple threat in the issue. Jerry Eskenazi has 3 great stories. Especially about our recent lunches, and I hope if you read the stories, you'll say, I should have been at that one. Maybe I shouldn't miss the next one. Anyway, I also want to thank Barbara Lovenheim and Bill Deal, who have been working along with our webmaster, Fred Herzog, to revitalize our website, bring it up more up to date. And I invite you all to send those 2 items. The duties are kind of split. Barbara is handling items that involve members' own business, and Bill is trying to put up stories on our website that link to stories about the news business that you might think of interest. Yes, somebody's waving. Oh, that's for a bottle of wine. Sorry. Anyway, we also have the Silurians Awards for outstanding journalism, and our new chair of the awards is Carol Lawson, who's here with her husband. Carol, where are you? Wave. I want you to stand up so that when everybody tries to avoid you to help us with the awards, judging and soliciting entries, when you see them swerve, you can just grab them by the collar. Anyway, to change the tenor a little bit, I'd like to say a few words now about the passing of someone many of you knew quite well. Sam Surratt, who died at the end of October, was not only a devoted member of the Silurians, but was part of the CBS family for many years. For more than 2 decades, Sam was the archivist of CBS News, where he developed a really close friendship with this evening's guest of honor, Sandy Socolow. It was Sam who took all CBS News information resources into the digital age. He also helped launch the International Federation of Television Archivists. Sam's wife, Judy Hole, who says she prefers the pronunciation Surratt. Have I got this right? Surratt. I think Sam was Surratt. Judith prefers Surratt. Is here, and she's also a member of the Silurians, so I'd like Judith to know that we all extend our condolences to you and to everyone who knew Sam, and I'd now like to ask for a moment of silence in his memory. Thank you. When we come back from dinner, we will hear a lot about Sandy Socolow. I'm even going to play a little bit of a tape of an interview I did with him in the hospital today. But in the interests of brevity, I'm going to condense one of the stories he told me and tell it shorter. And we will also hear from his son, Jonathan, who he's had a lot of conversations with about this dinner. And so now, let's eat. Thank you. Given Sandy's absence, the format has changed a little. So you may be able to think of this as a Quaker meeting or a bar mitzvah. But once I finish and Jonathan finishes, I'm going to ask people to use this wireless mic, which I will walk around and tell little stories about Sandy if they feel so moved. You all know that he's been a giant in the news business for a long time, although he started out as a copy boy after City College and Stuyvesant High at the New York Times. He joined the Army during the Korean War, ended up in Tokyo, producing United Nations Command broadcasts, and once he was discharged, he joined the International News Service as a correspondent roaming Asia. By 1957, he was at the Dumont Network. You all remember that, I'm sure. Writing for a guy he would know for a while named Mike Wallace. That year, Socolow joined CBS, where he was to spend 32 years. Writer, producer, bureau chief in London and Washington, finally executive producer of the nation's #1 program, CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite. Now, I remember I was at the Washington Star, and I would meet these CBS correspondents. I can't remember. I think it was Bob Sheaver may have been covering the White House then, or maybe Leslie Stahl. And at the last minute, some story would break, and they would be sent out to a triangle. I think it was 21st Street, M Street, and New Hampshire Avenue, which had one really sickly, smog-asphyxiated tree, to do stand-ups, and it was known as Socolow Park. Anyway, That's far from his only lasting contribution to journalism. I had the pleasure, I mean, I know this is an oxymoron, of seeing Sandy in the hospital today. You saw the picture, and I want to assure you that he actually is pretty compos mentis. That's a good question.
I can't tell you how unbelievably knocked over I was when Alan came up to me offhand, in a very offhand way, asked me if I would be the man or the woman of the leader this year, because it was so unexpected, and I've always thought of myself as one of the junior players in this player, and he said, how would I like being, and I don't think I said anything, walked away, and presto, next thing I know, they put out an announcement saying that the club is going to be my next of the year. Well, I can't tell you how flustered, flattered, overwhelmed I was, again, thinking of myself as a junior member of the team of this group of journalists that we all were. But then I got to it, and I started to think seriously about it, and funny thing happened on the way to the ceremony.
As you know, he had a little stroke in Malaysia because he had a good priced airline ticket. I tried to convince him to go after the dinner, but he wanted to see his daughter and grandchildren. I think that's actually even more important than this dinner. And I'm happy to tell you that he promises me he will be back for the Silurians lunch on January 15th, featuring Norm Pearlstein, the Chief Content Officer of Time Inc. Anyway, Sandy told me a great story today, and I'm not going to play it for two reasons. One, I ran out of tape, which I could not believe. And two, it was too long. If I told the story this long, he would have given me the hook. So I'm going to condense it for you. But it's important because it says a lot about his state of mind. Sandy started complaining about the censorship of journalism, and I'm going to put these words in his mouth about what a bunch of wimps we all are these days. And he was talking about when he was at the INS in Korea. He was, I guess, based in Tokyo, but he was in Seoul. This was 1954, and nothing was happening. He's sitting around the bureau, and this is, he says, the last war where full-time military censorship was in force. In other words, you could not file a story until it was submitted to a censor and approved. So nothing's happening. He commands a Jeep, as everybody did in those days, from the U.S. Army, and he goes about 30 miles north. There are no roads, so this is hours-long, pothole, rut-filled journey to the front somewhere along the 39th parallel, and he's going because there are two divisions that are going to trade places. So there are 30,000 American troops on the move, and it turns out a brigade or a division of 15,000 Oklahoma National Guardsmen are going to be taken out and put in with a fresh division of regular U.S. Army troops. And in those days, apparently, these guys took their personal gear out, but they left all the equipment behind. So the tanks, the trucks, the heavy artillery, that was all just left in the trenches. Because remember, these were big fixed Army units and all that stuff. So Sandy's there, and he said there are all these tents housing the troops that are the size of Ringling Brother Barnum and Bailey tents. And he's watching, and all of a sudden he notices there's this long line of small in stature, as he said, Korean people moving. And it turns out, he said he stopped counting after 800 because he figured he must have something more important to do. And the soldiers were all instructed not to talk to anybody who wasn't in the military and who was unfamiliar or was in civilian clothes. And so they were under penalty of jail and all that. So Sandy, by the way, he wanted me to tell you this story because well, I'm stepping on my own punchline or his, so I won't do that. So anyway, I'm going to still get to it faster than Sandy did, so you hang on, Myron. Fasten your seatbelt. So Sandy goes into one of these tents, and he sees that by this tent, this big line of Koreans are lining up, kind of single file. They're going into the tent. And one of the soldiers says, "You got to get out of here. You can't be in here." So that, of course, piqued his interest. So he goes, what did he do? He did what every reporter would do. He goes around to the other side of the tent. The guy spots him, comes over and says, "You can't be in here." And then he says, "You have no idea what's going on." And Sandy, of course, says, "What?" He says, "Well, the commanding general is really worried that these soldiers may be getting some exotic oriental disease from these people." And the explanation was that they were there because the GIs hired them independently to help them with stuff like their laundry. Well, on a closer examination, it turns out they're all women. And Sandy is like, "Wow, what a story. This is going to make my career. This is going to be the greatest story I ever did." Imagine how this is going to play in Oklahoma. Oklahoma boys serviced by Korean girls on front line in trenches along the 39th parallel. So he goes back, hops in the Jeep, runs back to write the story, and he submits it to the censor, who happens to be a guy many of the people in this room know or know of, named Alden Whitman. Later, the famous obituary writer for the New York Times. And Alden Whitman reads it, and he says, "You got to be kidding. You made this up." Guess what? Sandy has a big argument with him. Alden brings out the big rubber stamp and goes, "Boom, censored, no way." So then Sandy calls the bureau chief for INS in Tokyo, Marvin Stone, and it kind of obliquely explains the story. So then Marvin calls, this is the UN command apparently. Marvin calls the head of the UN command in Seoul, and they have a fight. So he then calls the head of INS in New York and complains about the story. Meanwhile, the story is sent to Marvin Stone in Tokyo. He reads it, as does the general in Seoul, and they say, "You got to be kidding. You made this?" "No, I'm not kidding." It goes to New York, goes to the head of INS and the Pentagon. The generals in the Pentagon convince INS to kill it, and it never gets published. Sandy's career, fortunately, did not suffer, but he tells me that he wanted me to tell this story so that you could all join in his arrest when they come to room 4614 at Lenox Hill Hospital, because at least according to the letter of the law, that would still be a prosecutable offense. So that's my Sandy story. I could have read his resume, but you all know the story. And it was a great story, and his son Jonathan, who I'm about to bring up, says he had never heard that story. So it was pretty. There was another one, but it was about a horse and Andy Rooney, and it's too long to go into. But I hope you can get it. Maybe we can get him to tell it to us sometime. So now I want to give Jonathan the plaque that we were going to give Sandy, and hopefully Jonathan will get it to him. Jonathan, come on up. So here's the plaque. I'm going to take it back from you in a second to read it. Once we get our intrepid photographer edition. Okay, all right. Okay, so the Society of the Silurians Lifetime Achievement Award to Sanford Sandy Socolow in recognition of your outstanding contributions to excellence in journalism during your long and distinguished career as an INS correspondent in the Far East, as an accomplished news writer in New York, as executive producer of the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite, as the CBS bureau chief in Washington and London, as a news executive, as a mentor and friend to fellow journalists, and above all, as an outspoken defender of journalistic integrity. Okay, Jonathan, take it away.
Hello, good evening. First, I was there for this story, and it is true. I thought I had heard all my father's stories, and this one was a first for me. The one thing I'd like to accent about it is he was very, very proud to be breaking the law. And he told Alan he wants this story told. He says he knows full well that it's classified and he's not allowed to tell it, but he wants it out there. I pat him on the back. I said, "Pop, a delayed Snowden." 60 years delayed, but still. I think what I'd like to do, really, I'm going to keep it short. I promised him I would keep it short, but focus on one thing that this story perfectly illustrates, which is my father's very subversive sense of humor. I think people who know him knows he's got sort of underdog's sense of humor. Several months ago, I forget exactly when it was, we were sitting in the apartment, and he was watching one of his shows, probably Rachel Maddow or Lawrence O'Donnell, and I was futzing around on the computer, and I said, "Hey, Pop, you're on Facebook." And he got all very excited. "Oh, tell me. I'm like, "Pop, you're on Facebook too. Why don't you go look?" And he still hasn't figured out how to operate it, so he asked me to read it to him. And he'd gone out to lunch with Joe Perenin, another CBS hand, and Joe had taken a photo and put it up on Facebook, and there was 40 some odd comments about it. And I said, "Hey, Pop, get a load of this comment." And a fellow named Sam Roberts, another CBS hand, said, "All you need to know about Sandy Socolow is that he's the man at CBS that Walter Cronkite trusted the most." And Sandy put on this Cheshire grin, loved it, asked me to read it to him again. And then I said to him as he was sitting there enjoying it, I said, "Hey, Pop, you know what that means?" And he's like, "No, what?" I said, "Well, you know who the second most trusted man in America is?" And he looks at me quizzically, and then he says, "Cronkite?" And I said, "Yeah, I mean, if the most trusted man in America trusted you, where does that put Cronkite?" And he loved it. And he was sitting there trying to figure out how to turn it into a joke. And he kept trying to figure out. And I told him, I said, it reminds me of a joke from law school. Every first-year law student learns, what's the highest court in the land? And the answer that everybody says is, the Supreme Court is the highest court in the land. And the law professor tells the student, aha, no. The highest court in the land is the basketball court that is on top of the Supreme Court. So I said, "Pop, try to work that in." Anyway, earlier tonight, somebody mentioned something from earlier in my life, his life, which is another example of his subversiveness, and then I'll close. At one point, we lived in a building that was 444 East 82nd Street, if I have the address right. And at the time, my father got into an enormous fight with our next door neighbor. Ferocious, volcanic. Fight to end all fights, to the point where the neighbor tried to burn our apartment down. I'm not kidding. This was featured in several articles in the New York Times. And at the end of it, we ended up moving up to Rockland County. and my parents were caught in litigation with the landlord and so forth. But two of my father's favorite souvenirs in life, which you can still find in our apartment up at 86th Street, he has on a little stand the doorknob from that apartment, which has an axe cleave right in it, from the neighbor trying to axe down the door. And he has a framed article where the headline reads, "Roommate testifies that arsonist hated the man next door." And it's an article about the trial of Herbie Quebec, who was my dad's arch enemy, who tried to burn down our apartment. And Herbie Quebec's roommate was testifying about how much he hated Sandy. And Sandy loved it. You couldn't make it up. And so, that's sitting up there. So anyway, to close, when Sandy was stricken in Kuala Lumpur. He never lost consciousness. He was very active through everything. Every single day I'd go visit him, and he was obsessed with this dinner and his speech and everything about it. And he was trying, what he wanted to do was figure out how to make a joke about having a stroke. And he kept trying it out on me, all these jokes, and they weren't working. And so I said, well, hey, Pop, who's the second most trusted man in America? And that always brought the big smile back on. And as Alan will tell you, visiting him today, his good humor, his subversive sense of humor, his mood is all still there. And help him in breaking the law. He was very eager to be an active participant in getting this story out. So with that, I will end.